On a chilly afternoon in the heart of the city, a homeless black man rested quietly on a bench at a bus stop when he saw a woman suddenly collapse nearby, stricken by a recurring heart condition. Bystanders froze. No one stepped forward, except him. With nothing but a few dollars to his name, he raced to buy the medication that could save her life. What he didn't know was that she was the wife of a powerful CEO, and that his fearless act of compassion would unlock the door to a brand new future. Have you ever witnessed a dangerous situation like this before? If you were the guy, what would you have done? Drop it in the comments. The wind picked up slightly as the late afternoon light cast long shadows across the concrete sidewalk. The bus stop stood at the corner of Lexington and 8th, wedged between a shuttered bookstore and a chain coffee shop that smelled more like cardboard than coffee. Most people hurried past it without looking. Just another mundane fixture of the city, another forgotten spot waiting for movement. On that bench, curled slightly to one side with his back against the armrest and his knees pulled toward his chest, lay Elias. He looked no older than 22, maybe 23 at most, though the worn-out hoodie and fraying sneakers added years to his posture. His backpack, once bright navy, now faded to a dull gray, served as a makeshift pillow beneath his head. No one gave him a second glance. A few teenagers passed by, one snickering softly while nudging the other and gesturing at the hobo before they disappeared around the corner. Elias didn't stir. His breathing was slow but alert, the kind of rest that came less from sleep and more from sheer mental exhaustion. He wasn't unconscious, far from it. His ears remained attuned to the rhythm of the street. Tires splashing in shallow puddles, snippets of passing conversations, the impatient stomp of high heels nearby. And then she appeared, walking briskly, balancing a paper bag of groceries in one arm and scrolling through her phone with the other. Clare Donovan didn't look like she belonged on this side of the block. Her camel coat was perfectly tailored, her boots the kind you don't find on sale racks, her hair swept back in that effortless way only achievable by those with time and means. She had just left the organic grocer 3 blocks away, the one with valet parking and free hand sanitizer at every aisle. Her steps were purposeful, until they weren't. Just as she passed the bus stop, her breath hitched. One step faltered, then another. Her hand reached instinctively toward her chest, the phone clattering to the ground beside her bag as her fingers clutched the fabric over her heart. Her face tensed. Pain bloomed across her chest like a fire being lit from the inside out. The sidewalk beneath her shifted, her vision narrowing as a wave of dizziness struck. She staggered once, twice, and then her knees buckled. The grocery bag hit the ground first, cans of soup rolling into the gutter, a bottle of almond milk tipping over and leaking through the mesh fabric of her tote. The world kept moving around her. One man slowed his pace but didn't stop. A couple crossed the street to avoid the scene entirely. Clare was gasping now, short, ragged breaths that couldn't quite fill her lungs. She tried to reach for her phone but couldn't coordinate her hand. Panic flooded her. Not here. Not like this. Elias sat up, instantly. His eyes had snapped open at the sound of groceries hitting concrete, and now his entire body was alert, tense. He saw her, well-dressed, middle-aged, collapsing against the steel pole of the bus stop sign. For a moment he hesitated, not because he didn't care, but because he knew what people saw when they looked at him. The dirty hoodie, the unkempt hair, the stigma of sleeping outside. But then she gasped again, barely above a whisper. That was enough. He was on his feet before most people realized anything was wrong. "Ma'am," he said, kneeling beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, but unfocused. He took her wrist gently, checking her pulse. Too fast, erratic. Her lips were turning pale. He recognized the symptoms immediately. Chest pain, shortness of breath, clammy skin. His voice remained calm, clear. "Do you have nitroglycerin on you, for your heart?" She tried to speak, coughed, then shook her head weakly. "Forgot. In the car." Her voice was no more than a breath. Elias looked up, scanned the street. No one had stopped. A few people stared from a distance but didn't step in. One woman took out her phone and began filming. No ambulance, no security, just him and a woman in the middle of what could become a full cardiac arrest. "Hold on," he told her, more promise than command. "Just hold on." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled wad of cash, $7 and some change. He knew exactly how much. It was supposed to be dinner tonight, maybe even tomorrow morning if he stretched it. But it didn't matter anymore. He stood up and ran. Not away, not from the scene as one or two bystanders might have assumed with their judging eyes, but straight toward the nearest pharmacy he remembered, 3 blocks back, on the other side of the park. He didn't care about traffic lights, or that his legs were screaming from fatigue, or that someone yelled, "Hey!" behind him. All he could hear was the shallow rasp of Clare's breathing echoing in his ears. In that moment, Elias wasn't just a homeless kid at a bus stop. He was someone who knew exactly what was happening and exactly how to stop it, and who didn't let what he didn't have keep him from doing what he could. The door of the pharmacy jingled with a faint, outdated chime as Elias burst in, breathless and wide-eyed, sweat streaking down the side of his face despite the chill outside. The inside of the store was quiet. Too quiet. A middle-aged man in a blue vest stood behind the counter, casually arranging bottles on a shelf, unaware of the urgency crashing through the door with Elias. "I need nitroglycerin," Elias said, voice sharp, too loud for the calm of the store. The pharmacist turned slowly, suspicious. "You okay?" he asked, eyes narrowing as they scanned Elias's clothes, his dirt-scuffed sneakers, his wild expression. "It's not for me," Elias said quickly, pushing his hands into his pockets to retrieve the wad of bills. "There's a woman, about 40. She collapsed at the bus stop 2 blocks over. I think it's angina. She said she forgot her medication. Please, just 1 dose, 1 tablet." The pharmacist hesitated, fingers tapping the counter. "You with her?" he asked. "Do you have ID?" Elias shook his head. "I don't, but I studied this. I was in pharmacy school 2 years. I know what I'm asking for. I'm not trying to scam you. She's going to die if she doesn't get something now." The man's face didn't change, but his gaze lingered a second too long on the bills Elias had placed on the counter. They were damp with sweat, crumpled and ugly next to the clean laminate. It wasn't hard to see the calculation in his mind: risk, loss, inconvenience. But then he sighed, muttered something under his breath, and turned toward the locked cabinet behind him. "You didn't get this from me," he said, sliding a small white packet across the counter. "And if anything happens—" "It won't," Elias said, already snatching the packet and sprinting back out the door before the man could finish. Back on the street, the city blurred around him. He ran past pedestrians who barely looked at him, past a honking car that screeched to a halt as he jaywalked blindly, past a group of teenagers who shouted something crude behind him, but were too slow to matter. His legs were burning, lungs drawing in cold air that stabbed at his ribs, but the image of Clare crumpled on the sidewalk kept him going. He knew time was the enemy now. Not traffic, not perception, not poverty. When he turned the final corner and the bus stop came back into view, his heart stuttered. Clare was still there. She hadn't moved much, still slumped sideways, back resting against the pole, her arms wrapped around her torso like she was trying to keep her soul from spilling out. Her lips were parted, breathing shallow and uneven, and her complexion had taken on a waxy pallor that made Elias's stomach twist. A few people stood nearby now, watching nervously from a distance. No one knelt beside her, no one did anything. One man with a Bluetooth headset was muttering into his phone while glancing occasionally toward Clare like she was some kind of street performance he didn't know how to categorize. Elias pushed past him, dropped to his knees beside her. Hey, Clare," he said, not even sure if she'd told him her name or if he'd guessed it from the tag on her grocery bag. Her eyelids fluttered, barely. That was enough. He tore open the packet with trembling hands and slipped the small, round tablet beneath her tongue. "Hold it there, just breathe." His voice lowered instinctively, gentler now. "Let it dissolve. You're going to be okay." Seconds passed like minutes. He kept his hand near her shoulder, not touching, just close enough to steady her if she started to fall forward. He counted the rhythm of her breaths, watched her chest rise and fall, waited for the color to return to her face. Slowly, painfully slowly, it did. Her breathing steadied, the tightness in her muscles began to ease, and the wild panic in her eyes dimmed to something softer. She blinked, fully conscious now, and her gaze landed on Elias. She opened her mouth to speak, but couldn't. Her eyes searched his face, puzzled and grateful all at once, and then filled with something close to disbelief. "You came back?" she managed, her voice hoarse. Elias smiled slightly. Of course I did. He didn't say I had to. He didn't say I couldn't leave you like that. He didn't need to. Around them, the city kept moving. But something had shifted at that small bus stop on Lexington and 8th. People had started to gather. Not in a crowd, but enough to notice. Enough to watch. A young woman with a medical ID around her neck stepped forward, offering to call paramedics. Another man brought over Clare's spilled groceries. A security guard from a nearby office finally arrived, radio crackling. But none of them had knelt first. None of them had given up their only $7. None of them had run like Elias. The wind cut sharper against his face as Elias ran, each step pounding against the sidewalk like a clock ticking louder and faster. He darted past storefronts, narrowly avoiding pedestrians, his chest tightening not from exhaustion, but from the weight of urgency. The pharmacy came into view like a flicker of hope, its green neon cross blinking faintly above the entrance. He shoved through the glass door and stumbled to the counter, the sound of bells overhead drowned by his heavy breathing. A man in a pressed white coat looked up from behind the register, startled. He was older, early 60s maybe, with silver hair combed neatly back and a name tag that read George Pharmacist. Elias planted his palms on the counter and leaned forward, catching his breath just long enough to speak. "I need nitroglycerin," he said, his voice hoarse. "Now. Emergency." George raised an eyebrow, stepping back slightly. "What's going on?" Elias tried to explain as quickly as he could. "Woman. Late 40s, chest pains, bus stop on Lexington and 8th. She said she left her meds." "I know what I'm asking. Please, just one tablet." The pharmacist eyed him suspiciously, scanning the dirt on his sleeves, the sweat across his forehead, the desperation in his voice. "You're not family? You have any ID?" "I don't," Elias admitted, already reaching into his pocket. He pulled out the crumpled bills, unfolding them with fingers that trembled from more than the cold. "This is everything I've got. It's enough. Please, just give me one dose." George's eyes lingered on the cash as if calculating risk, liability, inconvenience. The seconds dragged, and Elias felt like screaming. Finally, with a sigh and a muttered curse, the pharmacist opened the locked cabinet behind him. He pulled out a small white envelope, slid it across the counter. "Sublingual. Don't mess it up." "I won't." Elias grabbed it, nodded once, and turned back toward the door, already in motion. He ran harder this time, lungs burning, vision narrowed to the path ahead, the world around him blurred into streaks of color and movement, faces, lights, the distant sound of a car horn. But all he could see in his mind was Clare, slumped over, her breath growing thinner with every passing second. When he rounded the corner, the bus stop came back into view. His heart stopped for half a beat. She was still there. Clare was no longer on her feet. She had collapsed fully now, her back propped awkwardly against the metal post, her head tilted to one side, her face ghost pale. A few people had gathered, but they kept their distance, unsure what to do. One woman had her phone out, filming. Another man stood with his arms crossed, looking uncomfortable, but no one had stepped forward. Elias sprinted the last 20 feet and dropped to his knees beside her. "Hey," he said urgently, tearing open the envelope. Her eyelids fluttered. She was conscious, barely. He slid one arm behind her back and gently tilted her head upward. "I need you to stay with me, all right? Just hold on." He lifted the tiny tablet with steady fingers and pressed it beneath her tongue. "Let it dissolve. Don't talk. Just breathe through your nose. You're okay. You're going to be okay." Her breathing was rapid, shallow, but he watched as her chest began to settle. Her hands, clenched tightly against her stomach, started to loosen. The flush of pain in her face faded slowly, as if draining away through her skin. Elias stayed by her side, one hand hovering just above her shoulder in case she slipped forward. He spoke softly, reassuringly, every few seconds. "You're doing great. Just keep breathing. I'm not going anywhere." Minutes passed like lifetimes, and then her eyes opened, clearer this time, more focused. She blinked slowly, disoriented but alive. She looked at him, truly looked, and something shifted in her gaze. Recognition, confusion, gratitude, all bleeding together. Her lips parted, trying to form a word, but he stopped her with a quiet shake of his head. Don't talk yet. You're safe. That's all that matters right now." Around them, the sidewalk was still. The people nearby whispered, watching, some stepping closer now that the crisis seemed to be resolving. But no one had done what Elias did. No one had run like their soul was on fire just to save a stranger, and as the color slowly returned to Claire's cheeks, she realized something she hadn't in years. That help, when it came from the heart, didn't wear a suit or come with a badge. Sometimes it wore a torn hoodie and shoes held together by willpower and ran like hell through the cold just to hand you a second chance. Clare sat hunched slightly on the metal bench, her breath slowly regaining its rhythm as the worst of the episode passed. The crowd that had hovered awkwardly nearby began to drift away, reassured by the sight of her breathing more steadily, uninterested now that the drama had subsided. A woman who had been filming earlier pocketed her phone and muttered something about being late for Pilates. The man in the blazer who had stood watching never asked if she was okay. No one did, except for the one person who had nothing and gave everything. Elias remained crouched beside her, his body still tense, eyes sharp and focused in a way that made it clear he was trained, or at least had been. He stayed there not because someone told him to, but because instinct refused to let him walk away. Clare turned her head toward him slowly, her voice fragile but more coherent now. "You knew what to do. You knew exactly what to do." It wasn't a question, more a quiet revelation. Elias shifted his weight back, resting on his heels, suddenly aware of how close he was. "Yeah," he said simply. "I studied it." Clare narrowed her eyes, trying to place the pieces. "You're in medicine?" He paused, then shook his head. "Not anymore." She studied his face for a moment longer, as if trying to read years of story in the shadows under his eyes. "Tell me," she said. He didn't want to at first, not because he didn't trust her, he barely knew her, but because saying it out loud felt like dragging the weight back up to his chest. Still, there was something in her tone, not pity, not condescension, but real interest. The kind that had been missing from every conversation he hadn't had in years. "I was in my second year," he began. "Pharmacy school, full ride. I was good at it. But then my mom got sick, real sick. Insurance barely covered anything. I had to take care of her, work nights, missed too many classes. Lost my scholarship." He exhaled slowly, the words bitter but worn from repetition. "When she died, I had nothing left. No family, no backup plan. Loans didn't get approved. I dropped out. Tried to get back in a few times, but doors don't open the same once they've closed behind you." Clare didn't speak immediately. She looked down at her lap, her hands still trembling slightly. In the space between words there was understanding, not because she had lived what he had, but because she knew loss had many forms. "And now?" she asked. "You're on the streets?" He didn't flinch. "Most nights. I try not to stay in one place too long. Shelters are full or not safe. I find the places with the least attention. It's quieter that way." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "You still carry that knowledge, though, that training. You didn't hesitate, not once." Elias shrugged lightly. "Knowing something and having somewhere to use it aren't always the same." His voice was steady, but there was an edge beneath it, a truth hard-earned and never softened by sympathy. Clare leaned forward slightly, despite the soreness in her chest. "Do you have a phone?" she asked. "An email? Anything?" He gave a half-laugh, shaking his head. "No phone. Just a locker at St. Gabriel's. They let me keep some clothes there. I check in once a week." Her brow furrowed. "A locker? At the church?" He nodded. "Father Brennan keeps the key. He's good people." She was quiet again, thinking, not in a rushed, distracted way, but deeply, intently, the way someone thinks when a door inside them has creaked open and a thought they didn't expect has begun to take shape. Somewhere behind them, a siren wailed faintly in the distance. The sky had begun to dim, and the chill in the air crept deeper into their clothes. Clare reached for her bag, wincing as she sat up straighter. Elias moved instinctively to help, but she raised a hand, gentle, firm. "I'm okay," she said. But her eyes stayed on his, her voice low and certain when she added, "I'll find you, I promise." Elias didn't nod. He didn't say thank you. He'd heard promises before, heard them break like glass in the dark. But something about this one felt different, and even though he didn't dare hope, he didn't walk away either. Not yet. 1 week later, the world looked almost identical on the outside. Same city blocks, same gray skyline, same aching cold pressing against the windows of office buildings and shelter doors. But for Elias, something had shifted. It wasn't visible. No one on the street could see it in the way he walked, and no strangers paused to ask him what had changed. But inside there was a flicker, a pulse of something that felt dangerously close to hope. He hadn't told anyone. Not Father Brennan, not the man at the soup kitchen who always asked too many questions, not even himself in the quiet of night. But he had waited. Each day he passed the front of St. Gabriel's twice, checking the message board near the food pantry, pretending he wasn't looking for anything in particular. Each time the board was empty, a part of him told himself not to be surprised. Promises, he reminded himself, were paper thin in the real world. And then, on the 7th day, there it was. A manila envelope pinned to the corkboard with a thumbtack, with his name written in careful print. Elias Marrow. He pulled it down with numb fingers and turned it over. On the back, a small handwritten note, Locker 11, use the key. Don't disappear. Inside was a simple silver key and a folded letter. The handwriting was the same, steady, confident, the kind of script that comes from someone used to signing contracts, not writing personal notes. Elias, you probably don't believe in follow-through. I wouldn't blame you, but I meant what I said. You saved my life, and not just by getting that pill in time. You reminded me what courage looks like, raw, unapologetic courage with no reward on the other side. I spoke to someone at NYU's College of Pharmacy. They agreed to reopen your file. You've been reaccepted with a full scholarship, including housing. Orientation is in 2 weeks. You'll find a phone with service and a prepaid card in the locker. My office number is in the contacts. Don't let pride keep you from using it. Clare Donovan. He read it twice, then again. His hands trembled, not from cold this time, but from the sheer impossibility of what he was holding. For a moment he just stood there on the church steps, the wind tugging gently at the corners of the envelope, the city swirling around him like it had no idea something holy had just happened in the middle of its noise. Locker 11 was downstairs. He knew exactly where it was, but he didn't rush. He walked slowly, every footstep careful, deliberate, as if afraid it might all vanish if he moved too fast. Inside the locker he found the phone, just as she said. A plain gray smartphone. Next to it, a Metro card with enough rides to last the month. And beneath that, a small brown envelope containing a student ID, his name printed cleanly across the bottom, beside a photo he didn't remember taking but recognized as his. Tired eyes, messy curls, but something unmistakable burning behind them. Determination, or maybe survival. That night, Elias didn't sleep in the shelter. He walked instead, through neighborhoods he hadn't seen in months, passing the pharmacy where the pharmacist had once looked at him like a threat, the bus stop where Clare had collapsed, and finally, just before dawn, the steps of Donovan and Vale headquarters, tall glass and steel rising like judgment above the city. He didn't go inside, not yet. But he stood there long enough to understand that the story had turned. He was no longer just a name on a bench, or a blur in someone's rearview mirror. Somewhere across the city, Clare sat at her desk, reviewing quarterly reports while sipping tea instead of coffee for the first time in 10 years. When her assistant entered with a file, she paused. "Any news from admissions?" she asked. The assistant nodded. "He's in. Orientation confirmed. He picked up the phone yesterday." Clare smiled to herself, not with relief, but with something softer. Quiet joy, like a weight had lifted she didn't know she was carrying. She didn't need a thank you, and that wasn't why she'd done it. Clare Donovan wasn't a woman easily impressed, but that night, on a cold sidewalk, someone had chosen to run. Not for reward, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. And when a person like that falls through the cracks, the world doesn't just lose another life. It loses its conscience. Not this time. Not him. 3 years later, the city hadn't softened, but Elias had learned how to move through it without being crushed. The sharp edges still existed: judgment, inequality, the cold indifference of a system that forgot people as easily as it taxed them. But now he carried armor made not of bitterness but purpose. He didn't walk hunched anymore. His shoulders were broader, his steps firmer. The ID badge clipped to his chest read E. Marrow, Clinical Pharmacology Intern, Donovan and Vale. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same company whose name once felt unreachable now printed his initials on every elevator pass and lab access door he swiped through. It hadn't been easy. The first year back in school was brutal, his mind sharp but rusty, his body often worn thin from juggling coursework, work study, and the echoes of street life that didn't vanish just because someone handed him a key. There were nights he fell asleep at a desk in the university library, only to wake up to find a security guard nudging him gently and offering coffee. There were moments he doubted everything, wondered if he was some charity case being carried along by pity, but each time he remembered the day at the bus stop. He remembered Claire's face when the color had returned to her cheeks, how she looked at him not like a stranger, but like someone worth believing in. That memory steadied him when nothing else could. Clare never hovered. She didn't coddle or interfere. She simply opened the door and then made sure no one on the inside slammed it shut. When others questioned his place in the program, she didn't defend him with fanfare or public declarations. She sent a one-line email to the dean. He saved a life before he had a license. Imagine what he'll do with one. No one questioned his enrollment again. Now, standing in a sunlit corridor of the company's Midtown research wing, Elias peered into a glass-walled conference room where a team of researchers debated protocols. He wasn't on the inside of that conversation yet, but he was close. Weeks away from graduating, already fielding offers from hospitals and clinics, even a few research institutes. But he kept coming back here, to Donovan and Vale, because this was where the story had turned. This was where someone saw him not as a burden, but as a solution waiting to be trusted. He heard her voice before he saw her. Clare. On the phone, walking briskly toward the elevators, dressed in navy and white, heels clicking softly against the floor. Her tone was clipped, efficient, but when she caught sight of him, something shifted. She ended the call without breaking pace and offered him a nod that could pass for a greeting or a summons. He followed. They stepped into her office, high above the city. The windows looked out over a skyline that once felt like a wall. Now it felt like something else entirely, terrain to navigate, not fear. Clare motioned to a chair, then sat across from him, hands folded over a folder that bore his name. For a moment she just looked at him. "You've come a long way," she said. Not a compliment, a statement of fact. Elias didn't smile. He didn't need to. "I had help," he said. Clare leaned back slightly. "You had opportunity," she corrected. "You turned it into something." She slid the folder toward him. "Full-time offer, research division, rotation through clinical fieldwork, if you want it." He stared at the folder for a long second, then met her eyes. "Why me?" She tilted her head, not insulted by the question, just amused. "You still don't get it," she said. "Most people sit on the sidelines. They wait for instructions. They cover themselves first. But you ran. When no one asked, when no one would have blamed you for walking away. That's who I want in this building." He opened the folder. The numbers were more than fair, the title even better, but the part that stopped him cold was the letterhead. His name printed beside the company's. A partnership. Not charity, not mentorship, something equal. "I'll take it," he said quietly. Clare smiled. "Good. Then let's build something." She stood and he followed. As they walked back toward the corridor, she paused at the door. "One more thing," she said. "Next month we're launching a new foundation, scholarships, outreach. It's going to be named after someone." She looked at him, her voice softening just slightly. "You'll want to be there." Elias didn't reply immediately, but deep in his chest something cracked open, a quiet, wordless pride that didn't need applause. That night, as he walked home through the same streets that once swallowed him whole, he passed the old bus stop. It was still there. The same rust on the bench, the same flickering street lamp above. But it looked different now, like a place not where something ended, but where something extraordinary had begun. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.